Thank you very much, Rod. Pleasure to be here and great to have the opportunity. I'm very confident the dairy industry is going to play a significant role in helping our country improve economically in the future. In terms of the government's aspirations to equal Australia, I'm sure New Zealand, I'm sure the dairy industry will contribute. The way we're going to do that really is to improve our game, and tonight I want to share with you some of our thoughts that we've developed recently in terms of the strategy for New Zealand dairy farming. Our remit in Dairy NZ is essentially up to the farm gate, so we don't tend to do too much work for farmers post-farm gate, where John tends to occupy much of the tends to operate and pre-farm gate, of course. So that's sort of the context to which I want to talk to you about what's really happening on the farm to the farm gate, notwithstanding that there's a lot of value and a lot of activity at the other end as well. So in terms of what's been happening in the industry, some of the things that have been happening, well, we know that dairy does make a large and a growing contribution to the economy. As Rob will point out, it is the largest exporter in terms of the export revenue, and so in spite of the recession, that will continue to happen. Global demand is happening at somewhere between 2 and 3% in terms of the long run average. We know that global demand for dairy products is tailored a little bit and tapered off, but at the end of the day, the long-term outlook is still very positive, and much of that is fluid milk offshore. It is fresh, maybe 2/3, the experts say. So in terms of what we produce mainly, which is commodities and ingredients and so on, there's still a reasonably healthy I guess, slice of that demand that we can occupy. And that 2 to 3% is roughly in New Zealand dairy industry every year, so the long-term trend still continues to be very healthy. In terms of how we've gone on the farm, it's been a pretty good performance from a productivity point of view, about $83 per hectare per year on farm improvement in terms of profit you get from being more efficient, so from productivity. So that's outputs over inputs. So in spite of a very significant increase in the inputs on farms on average, we've still managed to increase our productivity, our outputs at a faster rate than the inputs are going in, to the tune of about $83, and that's against the sort of an operating profit of somewhere between $400 and $2,000 per hectare, depending on what the payout is. So that's the $83 there. However, we know that our cost competitive sort of base has been eroded in recent times. Our productivity has been going downwards, particularly because of the inputs going in and the higher cost structures of the systems we've got. And we know that a lot of our competitors overseas are very strong competitors in terms of their natural resources, labour costs and so on. So there is a real threat to us in that respect. So the imperative that we have to continue to be highly productive and efficient as an industry, which has always been the hallmark of our industry, remains, irrespective of the fact that others have gained ground on us. We still have to drive hard on that one. In terms of the sustainability agenda in a broader sense than just environmental issues, including welfare and all those other things, water and so on, the public and consumers are driving much of the agenda for that right now. Globally, I've just returned from 10 days overseas in Europe, and clearly it's happening all over the world, and we know that influences the political decisions that are made as well. So that's been a big trend that's happened recently over the last few years, you'd have to say, and that's amidst, I guess, some mixed public perceptions about dairying as well, and I'm sure you've all seen examples of that recently. Skilled people, it's an issue for everybody, but particularly for us on farm and right throughout the whole industry. And it's becoming increasingly urgent for us. So as we want to advance, it's so reliant on people, and that's becoming more and more apparent, particularly as our dairy farming systems become more diverse and more complex. The more complex systems do demand a higher skill level. And I think everything leads to the fact that in New Zealand we have to have a much more unified approach to the innovation system around primary agriculture and also around the adoption. And we often talk about research, but at the end of the day, it's really what farmers do on their farms that matters in terms of making improvements in any facet, whether it be on a profit sense or in a sustainability sense. So we've got to have a real unified approach, and if we do want to achieve what we need to achieve and to contribute to the government's aspirations, or more importantly to the dairy farmers' aspirations, then we have to have a unified approach. And I don't just mean within the industry, I'm talking about within society as well. So that's kind of some background on it, and against that really we have updated our strategy for New Zealand dairy farming recently. It's something that we started I think 5 years ago, before my time, the first version, and it has been updated just recently. It was a collaborative effort, involved, besides Dairy NZ people, we had Federated Farmers being involved, and what's called DCANZ, the Dairy Companies Association of New Zealand, which is really represents all the dairy companies. So they've all been heavily involved in it, as well as many other people outside, to come to some conclusions. Now, at the heart of our strategy is what we're calling a farming systems approach. So this really is the philosophy, if you like, that we have taken in developing this particular strategy. And it differs from the first strategy that we did maybe 5 years ago, and that was taking more of a reductionist approach of saying, well, let's divide up the problems we have on dairy farming into chunks like feed issues and environment issues and issues around animals and welfare and so on, and let's go and solve the problems, and then we'll have some good results. Well, I mean, that doesn't really work so well, because it's focusing just on some components within the overall system, and it's hard to make progress at a broader level. So we've taken this farming systems approach, and at the core of it you have the farm system itself, and this is represented by this sort of double yoker thing that you can see up there in the middle, and you've got the farm, the actual farm itself in terms of the cows and grass, the physical side, and the footprint in terms of resource use efficiency that is associated with that farming system. And then you've got the people and the business that I guess the people that run that business and the business aspects to it, and they're intertwined. So that's really the core of the farming system. But really what we're driving hard with this strategy is we're saying, well, it doesn't just operate in its own little boundaries, and that the farmers have to look outside the paddocks and look outside the boundary fences. It operates in a big wide world, and there are some external drivers that surround that, and that's really the outer circle, if you like. And you can cut that up and slice it and dice it any way you like, and we've chosen to really carve it up into the need for dairy farmers to show stewardship and social responsibility, the New Zealand public and their aspirations, and of course in turn that influences the government and their goals and aspirations, and last certainly but not least the consumers, who are really the most important people for us really at the end of the day in New Zealand, and trade issues as well. So we understand that the farm itself interacts with those external factors and vice versa, and we're seeing very much that those external drivers are having a greater impact on how we farm and how we will farm in New Zealand in the future. So that really is the farming systems approach, if you like, and I'll just now touch on the 5 outcomes that we've come up with. So we've looked in this strategy to produce 5 outcomes at a very high level that we want to achieve. And the first one is around profitability, and it's no coincidence that it's at the top, because that's what farmers, who obviously were the most important people behind this strategy, told us that they wanted as their number one. They want to be profitable, because most people are farming, besides loving the land, they're there to run a business and the animals. So it's profit from productivity, so it's actually profit from being more efficient. We're not actually talking about profit from higher payouts here. That's another kettle of fish. We're saying that as an industry we have to get profit from becoming more efficient. And the target we're aiming for in this strategy is actually $110 per hectare. So I talked about the long run average for the last 10 years being about 83 sort of dollars per hectare. Well, we're looking to raise that to $110 per hectare. And so we'll do that by a mixture of better adoption on farm and more research. And the adoption challenge is not insignificant. And if you look at the potential now to get more profit from that, for example, through better feed utilisation, you know, the average feed utilisation in New Zealand could be, say, 10 tonnes of dry matter per hectare. I don't want to get too technical with you. But if it's 10 tonnes of dry matter per hectare, we know the best farmers, yes, they might be growing more, but they are harvesting maybe up to 18 tonnes of dry matter per hectare by their cows. And that gap between 10 tonnes and 18 tonnes is what you might call the adoption gap, because you know what the tools are that you need to do to get there. It's not always easy to implement them, but we know we can achieve that, and it's about getting the adoption. Now, if we get every farmer to their maximum potential, if you like, for past utilisation, then you could add another $1 billion of revenue in terms of product to the economy. So that just gives you an example of the scale that you're dealing with and the potential from just getting the fundamentals right from a profit point of view.